If you're ambitious, driven, and disciplined, but you're secretly exhausted, this episode is going to be for you because high performers aren't burning out because they're weak. They're burning out because they care. And no one ever taught them how to lead sustainably. Somewhere along the way, productivity replaced purpose, hustle replaced health, and success, it became something that we chase instead of something that we steward. And you know what the scary part is? Most high performers don't even realize that they're burning out. They just think this is the cost of leadership. So today we're talking about why high performers are burning out faster than ever and what leaders are doing differently before it costs them their clarity, their relationships, and their calling. Welcome to the Leaders Leading Leaders podcast. I'm your host, John Espinosa. And if your goal is to build high-performance teams, I'm going to use my 20 years of leadership experience to share what I've learned. One of the things that when I was journaling this morning, I got into this content and I really had, it was a look inward. And I'm going to share the lessons that I've learned when it comes to burnout. Around 2 years ago, I was really, really close to just getting out of being a manager, being a frontline leader. It was a real problem that I had with this burnout. And I thought, just lead harder, just get in, study, figure it out, John. And what I did find, I should say, the real problem was burnout. It doesn't mean that you're lazy. It doesn't mean that you lack discipline. Because that's what I originally thought. I'm like, John, just get more disciplined. Figure it out. And if you're out there saying those words, we're going to talk about how you can lead differently. Because high performers, we burn out because we care. We were going through a tough time in the company. There was a new administration coming in and a lot of pressure. There was mandatory layoffs. There was buyout options, and it really got to the point where my care became just too much. I cared for everybody on my team. I cared for everybody within my companies, and it was a lot. Because the trap that we fell in, or I fell in, was that over-responsibility. I was taking responsibility for my team's worry, for my team's concern, for their stress. Right? And then I had tied my identity to results. So if somebody left the organization or somebody decided to take another opportunity, I almost put that on my shoulders. It was my fault. And the other thing that, I really got in trouble with was I was always on. I never took time to decompress. I didn't take the time to I call it be where my feet are. I was always thinking ahead 5 steps. Well, if I do this, how's it going to impact 3 decisions down the line? And, what I learned was it's the same traits that make us successful are often the ones that are killing our sustainability. And the reason why I think this is happening more now than ever. And I've worked with leaders through my consulting, my peers within the industry, and this is what I've uncovered. It's this pressure to perform publicly. And I wrote this down because everything, our social content, the visibility, when we start comparison is the thief of joy. And I tell that to myself. I have to remind myself about that because I'm always seem to be comparing myself to somebody who's maybe been in the business for longer than I have. And I don't know if you're there, if you're a new leader coming in to an organization, or maybe you've been given the opportunity to lead a team. And you start comparing yourself to people who have been leading teams for quite some time. And what that does is it builds up that pressure, that really unneeded pressure, because we don't give ourselves enough grace that we're novice. Novice means that we're new to the game. It doesn't mean that we were given any special treatment, but it is going to take some time for us to get to that expert level. And I can tell you, being 20 years into what I would say when I stepped into leadership, I'm still not an expert in leadership. I'm still learning every single day. And as things change, we have to adapt. The other reason why I think we're seeing burnout more than ever occur within our organizations, and especially in that frontline leadership rank with our business owners and the ones that are directly leading teams, is that constant access. We have instant messaging. We carry around cell phones. I have 2 cell phones, one for my day job, one for my personal job. There's no mental off switch. And we feel, going back to earlier what I said, we feel like we have to be on all the time. We have to respond to those instant messaging. When COVID hit, everybody began to work from home, and I think this is where really we fell into those bad habits of always being on, always feeling like we had to have constant access. We went from a desktop computer, and I'm dating myself here, but stick with me. We went to a desktop computer at our office that when you left for the day, that all stayed there. I didn't have a cell phone. They were very expensive back then. So everything was left at the office when I clocked out for the day and I came home. But then what happened was the rise of laptop computers, how cheap they got. We began to take those home with us. We began to put them in the bag. And now what happened? We were constantly checking. We got cell phones. Constantly checking those dings and those messages. And we always said, don't worry, give me a call at any time of the night. Just a quick pause in our episode. This might be exactly what you need to hear. If you're currently leading a team, or you want to lead a team, and you're spending your days putting out fires, you're not failing, you're just stuck. Because when everything feels urgent, nothing actually improves. And over time, that starts to chip away at our confidence as a leader. I've led teams under pressure for years, and firefighting isn't about effort, it's about those missing leadership systems. When expectations are clear and ownership is real, our teams, they stop reacting and they start solving problems without us. So if you're ready to lead instead of react, click on the link below, book a call, check out our consulting programs. All right, back to the episode. Constantly checking those dings and those messages. And we always said, don't worry, give me a call at any time of the night. The other reason why I think this is happening more now than ever is just the speed of change. Things are rapidly occurring, whether it's the market trends or it's just really change of priorities within our businesses and within our teams, our companies. And what happens because of that change is we got to make decisions. As leaders of our teams and our organizations and our companies, they depend on us. And for the most part, we'll talk a little bit about how we can eliminate some of that decision fatigue, but we have to make decisions. And so as things change more frequently, more rapidly, decisions are needed to be made, and that creates a lot of decision fatigue. And then the other piece is when we have leadership without a margin. So there's no room for error. And I always tell my team, failure is an option. We learn from our mistakes and we just continue to go. So those 4 things, I think I've seen in companies that I've worked in over the past maybe 2 years, in companies that I've consulted for, with my coaching clients. Those are the 4 kind of trends that I've taken out of our conversations. So we're leading really at a pace that we weren't designed for. Humans weren't designed for. So again, it's not an excuse. You're not lazy. You don't lack discipline. It's things are moving faster and faster and faster. And as a leader, we have this innate care that we don't want to get things wrong. We want to take care of our people. And that is what's creating this burnout. So I want to quickly transition into the myths. And these myths are breaking leaders. I've seen it time and time again, because one of the probably when people, we do our initial assessment and I ask somebody, okay, what's your weakness? What do you think is holding you back from being the best leader that you possibly can be? Guess what they say? The number one thing, time and time again, that people state is time management. If I can just optimize my time, I'll be fine. And that's a myth that we need to break, because the truth is that burnout, it is rarely a time issue. A lot of times, burnout is a boundary failure. Knowing when to disconnect, when to step away, when enough is enough. And if you have multiple businesses and organizations like I lead, sometimes those lines begin to blur. But today is an example. I woke up this morning, I set a timer, and I focused an hour on one organization that I'm a part of. Then I transitioned into home life. I had a couple things around the house, calls that I needed to make. I did that for another 45 minutes. And then I transitioned into getting ready for this podcast and recording this podcast. But those are the boundaries. And a lot of time, it's not time management. It's not, John, hey, you got to manage your time. It's set boundaries. And then this afternoon, I'm stopping at 5 p.m. No matter what I have done at 5 p.m., everything is going down. Electronics are going off. And now that's when I spend time internally focusing on my family, focusing on myself, my workouts, those types of things. The other thing that burnout I've seen the cause is delegation failure. We as leaders make too many decisions. We do not delegate enough. And I fall into this trap a lot of times, because in the end, we got money, we got time invested into our businesses. We have time invested into our teams. You may be looking to make that next step, that promotion. But if we do not delegate, the decision is always going to be our decision, and we'll never be able to step away from the organization because we make all the decisions. So delegation failure is what I see another reason for burnout. And then identity misalignment. And this one's pretty powerful here. So listen to what I feel and I say when I mean, if we have created identities for work, for home, for our marriage, for our parenting, for our Rotary clubs, for our church groups, that's 6, 7 identities that we have to manage. And when those identities don't align, guess what? That creates fatigue. And in the end, it feels like you're always chasing your tail. I am part of 4 organizations. I have a full-time job. I volunteer at the school events for my son's soccer team, for booster clubs. I mentor. I go talk to kids. If I had to maintain 7 or 8 different identities for all of those different activities, I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it, no matter what. And again, you go back, well, I just need to manage my time better. It's not a time management thing. It's an identity misalignment. So one question that I'm going to pose to you, and be honest with yourself. If everything stopped tomorrow, who would you be? Think about that. One thing that I think real leaders do differently, that I've seen, that when we begin to make a shift, it gets down to we create capacity. And in leadership, For me, everything is about creating capacity. Capacity to lead, capacity to listen, capacity to make decisions, capacity to do other things, to work on myself. So the shifts that I made, and I would encourage you to take a hard lift, 3 core shifts that we're going to discuss, have changed the way that I lead and changed the way that I mentor and I coach. The first one, shift from hustle to sustainability. When I was in my 20s and I was trying to get into medical school, I was hustling. I was hustling in school to get my GPA up. I didn't do a very good job in my undergraduate degree. And so in graduate school, I had to hustle. I was hustling to get in the medical field. I worked in the restaurant business for many, many years, and I had to get a job in the medical field. I didn't have any experience really in the medical field. I always told myself I wanted to be a doctor, but I worked at a restaurant. I didn't get to do a lot of doctoring or medical practice within a restaurant. So I hustled to get into the medical field. And then I hustled at home. I hustled. We had a very young family. When I was 20, I had 2 kids under the age of 2. And talk about hustling, my wife and I, we hustled. We hustled out. I worked at, I call it, I was a carnivals. So it was a gelato and a Italian sub, they would call it a food truck now, but I hustled, got paid cash while I was working at the restaurant, while I was mowing lawns around the neighborhood. I'd knock on doors and go around people's whose lawn was long, and I was hustling doing that. But that wasn't sustainable. That wasn't sustainable. I wasn't spending any time with my 2 younger kids. Thank goodness that we had family around and we could, they could help us out. But I was constantly hustling. What I learned was, as I got throughout, all those mistakes and that time passed and I could never get that time back, is now I've moved to sustainability. And we'll talk about seasons, because there are some seasons where you may need to hustle. But when that season, when you're migrating out of it, migrate to sustainability. What are the things that you can sustain over time? Can you sustain your leadership, how you're currently leading? Can you sustain your time commitments, the things that you said yes to? Those are things that we as leaders have to be very mindful. The second core shift that I made was shifting from control to trust. And when we have to control everything, because I was a control freak, I had to control all the decisions. I had to control the money. I had to control even what we bought, as far as supplies, what type of pens, what type of pencils. We couldn't afford the big stuff, right? With the name brand, we had to get the cheaper brand, the knockoff versions. And what I learned was, and the shift that I had to make was, I had to trust somebody to go and do those things, to purchase supplies, to make decisions. And that was tough at first. It was tough because I'm a perfectionist. I like things done a certain way, and I hold myself to a very high standard. And what I learned I needed to understand, one, that not everybody is going to do the job, make the decision the same way that I make the decision. And that's okay. That's okay. Because I trust them. I trust that they're going to make the decision that's best for the organization and the team. I trust that they're going to order the supplies within a certain guideline, stay within budget. That shift, this number 2 shift from control to trust, created capacity. It created capacity for me to take off work. Created capacity for me to think strategically, because I wasn't in the day-to-day, the tactical stuff. And one of the big lessons that I learned in this shift, it's okay that people aren't going to do the job the same way that I would have done it, but I focused on the product and not the process. The third core shift that I made is I shifted from identity in results to identity in values. Going back to what we talked a little bit about earlier, when you are result focused and everything relies on a profit margin, or back to when people would leave the organization, the result was that they retired or they left for another opportunity, I blamed myself. And the shift that I needed to make was, that's not me. That's not what my identity is. My identity, we can't control everything, especially decisions that other people make. And for me, it was the value piece. And this goes back to the misalignment in our identity in the first place, is if I have different values at work than I do at home and in my church groups, that misalignment, it will create burnout. And for me, I had to rest on the fact that, did I do everything that I possibly could have done to create a team environment, to lead a company that had the values, my core values: trust, relationship management, treat people like you want to be treated, listen. Those things were important to me, and that's where my identity is now. And because I made that shift, if somebody does leave for another opportunity, if we make a mistake and we fail, we can go back to those values and say, okay, are we misaligned from those values? Or if we stuck to those values and they still left, we did everything we possibly could have done. Some other examples that I see when you shift from these core things, these three core things, is saying no without guilt. I used to feel very, very guilty saying no to people, especially for opportunities that I really got excited about. But what I learned was I had to have those boundaries and then not feel guilty about saying no. The other really piece was leading from clarity and not urgency. When everything is urgent, nothing's urgent. I had to get very clear about the purpose, the process, my guardrails, my guidelines, my frameworks, all of those things. And then designing recovery into leadership. Probably the most important thing that I did was create a time where I put everything down and I focused internally. It goes back to that oxygen mask. If we don't put the oxygen masks on ourselves, guess what? We run out of oxygen and we're not able to take care of anybody else. So designing recovery into my day, designing recovery into my week, taking vacations, scheduling those way far out to where I had something to look forward to. Those are the things that I was able to do differently. So real quick, I want to present a framework. And this framework, it's something that I've prescribed to, something that I coach on and help my clients with. And it's real simple and easy. It's PACE. It's the PACE reset. And PACE stands for pause, audit, clarity, and empower. So when we pause, it goes back to creating that white space in our schedules, in our calendars. We have to schedule this. Too many times, I have a meeting block in the morning from 8 to probably 10:30. That's my meeting block. That's where I do my one-on-ones. That's where I do my really high-functioning meetings, my peer meetings, my manager meetings, my team meetings, my check-ins, my stand-ups, those types of things. And then there's a block of time, white space, that I spend on checking emails, calling clients, strategic thinking. But that white space is scheduled. Because what I found is, and what probably many of you out there have also found, is that white space begins to get smaller and smaller and smaller. Because a lot of people have access to my calendar and they'll get in for 10 minutes. Or they'll call me and say, hey, John, I noticed you got a noon o'clock that's free. Is it okay? And for me, again, going back, guilty of saying no, sure. But if I schedule that space, normally I don't get the call, and I'm able to be disciplined to devote my time to doing those activities within that white space. Even if it's a simple get up and walk around for 20 minutes. That's what the pause is. Let's talk about the audit. So, auditing what's draining versus what's giving energy. There are tasks, there are people that we surround ourselves with that we bring inside our circle that drain our energy. They're energy vampires. For me, and sometimes you have to deal with those people. They're clients, they may be an employee, hopefully not for long, or you're coaching them, that are going to drain your energy. For me, I've made a good conscious decision to limit my time with those and then increase my time with those activities, those tasks, those people that give me energy. So that's the audit. And then clarity. This is where I was talking about earlier with what season are you in? We're all in different seasons, not just in life, but in business. Are you in the building season where you're a go-getter and you don't have kids, and so you're willing to work a little extra, put in that extra amount of time to get to where you need to be? Or are you at that, teenager time frame, not even really teenager, about 10, 11, where your kids are in sports, where you have to be at the sporting event, you're maybe coaching a team? Or are you at the end where now kids are grown, you have grandkids, and you're looking forward, you have more years behind you than you do ahead of you? So you have to get clarity around what season you're in, because that is going to determine your mindset and where you want to be. And then last, empower. And for this, you got to get really, really honest, because for me, I used to like to rescue people. I was a fixer. I'm still a fixer. And when you find that person that you're like, you know what, I can fix them, I can help them. But in the end, I was expending way more energy. I own 70% of that relationship instead of 50% of that relationship. And when you're giving more than you're receiving, you're rescuing. So who are you rescuing? Because we empower the ones that need the responsibility that we see. It's our responsibility as a leader to develop future leaders, to develop our replacement. And so this empower piece out of P.A.C.E, who needs that responsibility? Not rescuing. So P.A.C.E, pause, audit, clarify, and empower. Very great mindset kind of framework that just go through those 4 things, answer those questions, and put down in the comments. You can put down in the comments or, share it with somebody that you may see in a very similar situation. So the last thing that I want to cover today, and this is that reflection and self-audit. And these are some questions that I had to ask myself, and I still have down. And, one of them, what would you change if you led at 80% on purpose? This is a technique that I actually, when I was creating training schedules for organizations that I was working for or in, and they'd give me a requirement. They'd say, hey, John, I got 100 people that need to be trained this year. When I'd go to schedule that, I'd always schedule at 80%. Don't ask me why. It was just a number that I felt very comfortable scheduling at. And then that would give us enough room to increase classes, put another offering on the schedule. Or if we weren't trending, if we weren't burning as much as we needed to burn, or maybe we, first 2 quarters, we got through a lot of that requirement. The last 2 quarters, we could kind of back off. And I found that this 80%, it worked in other things. It worked in how I scheduled my calendar. It worked in the effort I put in to a lot of tasks, leadership, time management, relationship management. And it's not that I'm 80% in, it's I'm 80% scheduled. So what would you change if you led at 80% on purpose? The other question that I begin to ask myself is, what are you afraid of, John? What are you afraid would fall apart if I slow down? And this goes back to the hustle piece versus sustainability, because this question directly points to slowing down. What would I be afraid that would fall apart? Is it the business, the momentum that we've gained? Is it the fact that, now we're hiring and we're getting to a point where we have to scale up? And if I step away now, if I slow down, things would fall apart. Those are real questions that I've asked myself and real things that I've seen leaders struggle with. And then the last question here, just on a reflection and self-audit, is your leadership sustainable for the next 10 years? And maybe if you're in that season where you only have 5 years left, is your leadership sustainable for 5 years? Whatever that looks like. These questions have helped me create that mindset that I need to continue to sustain my leadership model, not hustle through it. So as we close, I hope that everybody has learned something today. If you're not subscribed, 50% of the listeners, according to our stats, are not subscribed to this channel. Do me a favor, subscribe to the channel. Save it. Go back to it later. Take notes. I try to give practical applications to all of this, not just philosophy. We need both. We need to change our mindset, think, do, be. Then we need to change our behavior. And then those two things change how we become who we are. So as we wrap up, you don't need to quit leadership. We just need to redefine it. And if this episode resonated with you, again, share it with another leader who's carrying too much. Make sure that you subscribe, as always, for conversations that help leaders lead from wholeness, not exhaustion. I believe in you. Go be great. Talk to everyone on the next episode. Bye-bye.